To discuss this, I'm joined now from Augusta in the U.S. state of Georgia by Han Park. He's the founding director of the Center for the Study of Global Issues. In Washington, we have Bruce Klingner. He was the CIA chief of the Korea branch and is now a senior research fellow for Korean affairs at the Heritage Foundation. And in Beijing is Qinduo, a political analyst specializing in Chinese affairs. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Bruce, let me start with you. How would they be receiving and viewing the images and the news of Kim going to Beijing in Washington? How would they see this?
Well, I think it's another indication that there will be a U.S.-North Korea summit perhaps in the next few months. National Security Advisor Bolton had said last month that the president wants to have one in January or February, despite the lack of progress. And the president had said they're discussing venues. So this could be, as Kim's father often did, going to Beijing to coordinate plans and policies before a big summit, either with South Korea or with the U.S.
So, Bruce, why is Beijing needed to sort of pave that way before a summit?
Well, I think North Korea always wants to coordinate with China to sort of hope that Beijing has their back, and perhaps a signal to Washington that even if the U.S. doesn't remove sanctions or have the UN remove sanctions, that North Korea may reach out more to China, hoping to get economic benefits, although, of course, most of the benefits would be constrained by UN or U.S. sanctions.
Qinduo, does North Korea have the support of China?
Well, I think, of course, for Kim and reaching out to China, he needs a coordination in terms of the policy toward the U.S., toward the dialogue with President Trump. And also, I think China will give him the support and also encourage him to go ahead to find a solution with Washington to, say, like destroy all the nuclear weapons, to bring peace and stability to the Korean Peninsula, which is also being sought after by North Korea in order to develop their economy.
Han Park, is it the right move to go to China before a potential summit with the U.S. again?
I think for the interests of North Korea itself, this is a very clever move. North Korea has always been dealing with the superpowers, the Soviet Union in the past and China at the same time. But now, in order to maximize benefit for China, for North Korea, Pyongyang has always maneuvering between the two superpowers in the past. Now it's their best interest, they think, to get closer to China and the United States at the same time. But it doesn't take a whole lot to make a good relationship with China because it has already established ideologically, culturally, politically, they are very close. Whereas North Korea and the United States is a long way to go. But I think that this is a good effort on the part of Kim Jong-un to maintain good relations continuously with China and exploring better relations with the United States at the same time. That's what he is doing at this time.
So, Bruce, China has complied with those UN Security Council sanctions on North Korea. At the same time, they want them relaxed. At the same time, they're North Korea's biggest trading partner. Has China been a bit of a maverick and a source of frustration for the Trump administration when it comes to North Korea?
China's implementation of required sanctions has been cyclical. Usually after a North Korean nuclear test, Beijing's rhetoric will become stronger. It will, for several months, enforce required sanctions to a higher degree, and then over time it tends to slide. And that's what we've seen after, say, the January 2016 summit. Nuclear test. Now we've seen increased reporting about more trade along the border between North Korea and China. We've had numerous reports of Chinese ships and offshore ship-to-ship oil transfers in violation of sanctions. So, and certainly Beijing, along with Moscow and Seoul, are advocating a relaxation of UN sanctions, although North Korea hasn't really taken any significant denuclearization steps.
Can I respond
yes,
to that? I think there's, like my colleague pointed out, a lot of reports, but it's not only based on facts, let's say, whether China or South Korea or any other country has violated the UN resolution. And also, I think people should remember the ultimate goal of a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula is shared by China and the United States. To some extent, you can also say by North Korea and South Korea, of course, Japan too. So I think the goal for China is very clear. That is, China will not allow North Korea will be armed with nuclear weapons, because China sees that as against its own national interests. So any reports of like China violating UN resolution, I think is not based on the fact, because it's not serving the Chinese interests. And also, if you look at, people say, the peace process has been stalled, there's no progress. But look, after the summit in June between Kim Jong-un and Trump, Kim Jong-un has destroyed some of its facilities and also has stopped its nuclear and missile tests. So what has the U.S. done? U.S., yes, suspended the military exercise with South Korea, but it can resume immediately at any time. So everybody is blaming North Korea for not disarming completely. But if you look at the statement, look at the joint statement between the two leaders last June, this last one page, right? It's not a full page. It's very simple. That is, they want to develop a new relationship. So what is a new relationship? Mm-hmm. That means like, kind of like equality. North Korea will not create trouble for the U.S. The U.S. will say not like impose more sanctions or strangle this country. So basically, for North Korea, they are looking at lifting some of the sanctions. They need some encouragement in exchange for their further step, let's say, to arm some of the weapons over there. Yeah.
Bruce, you want to tackle some of that?
Yeah, of course, under UN sanctions, 11 of them, North Korea is required not only to not test, but to abandon its nuclear, missile, and biological chemical warfare programs in a complete, verifiable, irreversible manner. So the continued existence every day of the nuclear and missile programs are themselves a violation. So, and North Korea had said they no longer need to test nuclear weapons or missiles because they've successfully completed their ICBM and their nuclear warhead program. So abandoning the two missile sites, or I'm sorry, the two test sites, really isn't a significant step. And of course, they did it without international inspection. So I think the U.S. is looking for, putting meat to the bare bones of the Singapore summit. It is correct. It's only a page or less so. So, it's very disappointing. I think what we need to do is have more detailed, carefully crafted agreements like we did with the Soviet Union on arms control. So we need to move beyond the 8 failed agreements in the past with North Korea, which were always very short, very vague, and didn't have sufficient verification.
Yeah, and Professor Han Park, when we look at this, I mean, sometimes we need a reminder of the big picture. It is about a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. This is not about bringing democracy to North Korea or about human rights in North Korea, although those issues are sort of folded in as sub-chapters. At the heart of it all, nobody wants a nuclear exchange. After all these months, and we've had you on the show multiple times, you've seen Kim Jong-un at these multiple summits, and you've been able to gather a reading on the young man as he compares to his father and his grandfather. Are you convinced that he wants to give up his nuclear weapons, Han Park?
No. I think we waited. The world has waited too long. North Korea has crossed the bridge of no return. North Korea has nuclear technology, scientists, science, raw material, the experience. So even if they give up completely irreversibly, they will become a nuclear producer once again within a short period of time. So they are announcing that they're going to give up nuclear weapons because they have nuclear capability already. So the world has waited too long. We don't know how to deal with maybe non-proliferation, maybe all we can get. But this denuclearization, we have to be very empirically, scientifically examine the feasibility, the desirability even of it, given the current situation.
Okay, that's fascinating because, Bruce, Han Park is usually the most dovish character we've ever had on this program when we discuss this, and he's saying we've passed a point where giving up nukes completely, or at least the knowledge to make them, is old news now. We've moved beyond that. So what does Washington do then? I mean, ultimately, you're going to have to live with a nuclear North Korea in some form, right?
Well, I don't think we just throw up our hands in defeat and say, all right, let's rip up 11 UN Security Council resolutions. Let's really rip up the Non-Proliferation Treaty and decades of U.S. Policy against proliferation. North Korea already proliferated nuclear materials when they were helping build a reactor in Syria. So I don't think we can just say, well, you guys won. You can keep your nuclear weapons. You can be a threat to your neighbors and to the United States. We can't just do that. I think the UN resolutions mean more than that.
Okay, so what do you do?
Well, I think we continue to have a comprehensive integrated strategy using all the instruments of national power. I think the problem is the Trump administration has played several different cards poorly. We should have diplomacy, but not, I think, the flawed techniques that the Trump administration has used. Also, you maintain pressure until the actions which triggered the responding sanctions have been ameliorated. Trump says we have maximum pressure. We don't. There, as he said, 300 North Korean entities that we're not sanctioning, which are violating U.S. law because of the interests of diplomacy. Also, I think Trump has mishandled the relationship with our South Korean ally. I think that relationship is strained. So there are a number of other factors. And also, I think we do need to continue focusing on human rights, whether it's part of the nuclear negotiations or not. This is a country that the UN has deemed committing crimes against humanity. I think that's something we can't just ignore.
Han Park, Bruce is saying that you don't need new thinking. You just need to follow through with the existing thinking and the existing policies. Do you agree with that?
No, the existing policies have never worked, have never been productive.
Including
the
South
current
Korea's.
Policy simply the waste of time. It is so important for North Korea to have the motivation to give up their nuclear arsenals. They do not have that motivation. Now with new South Korea, North Korea is encouraged to maintain current policy. So we have uphill battle. I'd like to see denuclearize Korean Peninsula, but the method, the pathway is very, very difficult. We have tested, experienced setbacks one after another. So I'm not very optimistic about maintaining current policy whatsoever.
Qinduo, from Western eyes, a lot of people look at the Chinese and say that, hold on for a second. So a lot of people look at the Chinese and they say, yes, we know that North Korea is in your neighborhood and you don't want a flood of refugees over your border. And we understand that you need to be sensitive to all of this. But for as long as China treats North Korea as a little brother, and for as long as China continues to do business with North Korea, then sanctions are tepid at best, and any pressure doesn't really mean much because the North Koreans always have the Chinese option. Address that for me.
This is a very pessimistic view, and also there's a lack of understanding, obviously. If you have such kind of a view, people should understand that, yes, North Korea and China are close friends and also immediate neighbors. But remember, no country likes to have a nuclear-armed country like North Korea just beside you. So for China, China shares the goal of the United States. This is something, the common ground between the two countries. This is something they have been working together. And that's why China endorsed the UN resolution to impose sanctions on North Korea. China has made it officially very clear. China will not accept a nuclear-armed North Korea because this hurts China's national interests. This destabilizes Northeast Asia. This creates a lot of trouble. So China has been supporting the dialogue, has been supporting North Korea efforts, the U.S. efforts to solve their problem. Look, I disagree with some of the ideas by my colleague. I think now we are having a opportunity, a very important opportunity. Yes, the first meeting is just less than 1 page long, but look at what kind of atmosphere we have now. It's quite optimistic, I would say. Despite all the impasse, despite all this, lack of progress over the past month, you can see Kim Jong-un has made it very clear during the New Year speech. He's committed to denuclearization. He's ready to give up nuclear weapons, and he's ready not to proliferate the nuclear weapons. He's looking forward to a summit with Donald Trump. And of course, they need to work out what's the procedure, what's the detailed, roadmap for the next steps. This is something they need to work out. And the US side is something like, we are waiting for you to your complete destruction of your nuclear weapons, and then we will do something. I think this attitude or this policy is unrealistic. The US side should give the North Korean side some encouragement by doing something like lifting part of the sanction to encourage the government to do more. I think that probably is the right approach.
Bruce?
Well, people say remove some sanctions. Well, those are U.S. laws, and they're not only related to denuclearization. So, when people say remove the sanctions, are those the ones that are related to human rights violations? Are they the ones related to felony crimes such as money laundering? Are they the sanctions related to North Korea's counterfeiting of U.S. currency? Are they the sanctions related to North Korea being a state sponsor of terrorism? Is it okay if North Korea supports terrorist activity? Is it okay if North Korea violates U.S. laws protecting our financial system? So it's not as easy as just slicing off 5, 10, 8% of sanctions. So, with North Korea, we're looking for a dialogue, and they were the ones that canceled the meeting with Secretary of State Pompeo. They're the ones that have refused for months to have any meetings with Special Envoy Began. So, as has been true in the past under previous administrations, the U.S. is looking for dialogue,
Bruce,
and North Korea has refused it.
Since the summit, what has the U.S. done to encourage the progress, to encourage more progress, let's say? I mean,
we've canceled,
except for the temporary suspension of this military exercise with South Korea. I mean, okay, North Korea is looking for a peace declaration, say the normalization of a diplomatic approach with the United States. If you look at the U.S. media, even a summit meeting, people in the U.S. would view a summit meeting as an award to North Korean the leader Kim Jong-un. I think that kind of attitudes, from Asia, from countries here in this region, we see that kind of attitudes is a bit like unrealistic. Mm-hmm. If you want to solve the problem, you have to talk to each other.
Okay.
I mean, what's wrong with having a summit?
Fair question, Bruce.
Right. So the U.S. has canceled 9 military exercises with our ally, either unilaterally or bilateral military exercises. That's caused no change in North Korean behavior. North Korea continues, we see from satellite imagery, to expand and refine its production facilities for nuclear warheads, re-entry vehicles, missile launchers, missiles, and fissile material. We've seen that North Korea, the ball is in North Korea's court. They are the one in violation of UN resolutions, not the United States, not South Korea. So Began is trying to get meetings. North Korea refuses.
Okay. Just before we wrap up, Han Park, if and when that follow-up to Singapore happens, and there's another summit and there's another photo op, beyond the photo op and beyond the symbolism of a sitting US president and Kim Jong-un shaking hands and smiling, are you optimistic that something good can come out of it?
Yes. If the United States is willing to consider withdrawing some of the sanctions, if the United States is willing to work with Pyongyang for eventual peace treaty and diplomatic normalization, then North Korea will come out with a clean hand. They will give up their weapons, although they know that they can go back and produce again. But existing facilities, weapons, and everything, they will give up.
Okay.
So we have to work toward that.
Okay, that would be historic, and we certainly won't go out of business in this industry, and we'll have you all back on the show to discuss that. But gentlemen, it's been a pleasure talking to you all once again. Han Park, Bruce Klingner, and Qinduo. Thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers.